What makes for a loving relationship? Hi, I'm Andrew Rodriguez, and welcome to Psycho Bible, babbling about psychology and theology. I've been doing a series of videos exploring the nature of love, using Karol Wojtyla, or Pope John Paul II's, book Love and Responsibility as our conversation partner. And in this video, we're going to tie everything together. A client of mine recently asked how he can tell which type of girl is worth pursuing, and how he can tell if it'll be a truly loving relationship. So I offer some wisdom from the study I've been doing. So I'm going to tie some things in, some stuff I've already said and some new information. First, we start with the knowledge, the security of knowing your own worth. Both you and the person you're pursuing, both the subject and the object, you need to know each other's worth. He needs to know his worth, he needs to know her worth. And she also needs to know her worth, as well as his. That's deriving from the personalistic norm, that a person is such an entity that the only proper response is love, which is to will the good of the other. And the reason why that's the proper response is because each person has incalculable worth. As Christopher West always says on his podcast, you are an unrepeatable, irreplaceable gift. And our mission in life is to simply become what you already are, to fully realize that. And so giving and receiving love aids us in that whole process. So there needs to be a certainty about who you are, what your worth is. So that way you won't fall victim to someone using you and falling into codependency, and also, as you know what other people are worth, as you know the worth of that object of your love and affection, you will know where the proper limit is to how much you should do for that person, that you won't go overboard and lose yourself, but also so that you won't abuse that person and take advantage of that person. There will be a constant concern for what is true and right in regards to treatment of the other person, as well as for yourself. Knowing your worth also is a starting place for understanding that you're worth it for you to pursue a relationship, for you to have love, for you to have a marriage, to have a wife or a husband, to have children, to start a family, to be involved in a community, that you have something to offer and contribute to society, to the rest of the world, or just to one other person. There's some good in you. We're going to get into that more in a little bit, but understanding your worth. Now, of course, there's going to be some insecurities and some weaknesses, some inadequacies that we need to learn how to, one, accept, as well as to overcome. I often remind my clients of the serenity prayer. God, help me to accept the things I cannot change, and give me the strength to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. There's a degree of acceptance of inadequacy that we must perpetually have, while still striving for excellence and further growth and maturity. Knowing your worth, knowing what you are as a person, who you are, is what tells you that I'm worth developing further, and I'm worth for someone else to desire and pursue, and to willingly desire and pursue me. I shouldn't have to manipulate someone or guilt trip them into wanting to be with me. And I shouldn't have to lose my own identity in my pursuit of loving someone else. So that's our starting point, okay? Then love must be integrated. We talked about that a bit in last video, but the main idea here is that the essences of love, attraction, desire, and goodwill must all be unified. They must all be working together. So if it's just one without the other elements, it's not going to be true love. Even if you just have goodwill. If there's goodwill, you're doing good for someone, but there's no attraction, there's no desire for them, well, it can eventually just turn into a burden that will never be relieved for you. So there has to be both the attraction and the desire. But if it's just those elements and no goodwill, It leads to using the other and taking advantage of each other. Even if it's mutual, you can have mutual exploitation, but that's not love. But integration starts in the individual. Like I said before, you need to know your worth, so you yourself must understand your own wholeness. Love aims at integration within the individual, as well as integration between persons. Think of the word integration. It comes from the word integer, the Latin word for whole. Therefore, integration means making whole. And we're constantly, throughout our lives, in the process of being made whole. None of us have fully arrived. The only one who actually embodies wholeness is Jesus. But he gives us this hope that he is redeeming us for those who follow him. And if he is in you and he is whole and he has no brokenness, then we can pursue the wholeness that he himself has. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The process of integrating love relies on the primary elements of the human spirit, freedom and truth, which we've already spoken about in our past videos, with last video about desire, that what we need as a solution to the bondage of concupiscence is freedom. And what we need in regards to love, that is just liking someone or making the other person feel good, we need truth. Love must be grounded in the reality of who we are and what is actually good for us, the truth of what is good, not just the opinion. So if you personally are not working toward greater integration, ask yourself, how much do you actually love yourself? Are you willing your own good, that you be actualized to your fullest? And then if your relationships aren't working toward greater integration, ask yourself, how much do you actually love those other people? Do you actually desire for them to be fuller, to be more whole, for your relationship to be more whole? So if we're seeking wholeness, we have to understand that love is a virtue. It's not just a feeling. I hope you've gotten that message as we've gone through this. The feelings are elements of it, but it's a virtue, it's a discipline to love someone, to take the feelings that may naturally or spontaneously arise, but then to shape them toward the proper expression. And so therefore, if it's a virtue, the matter of love is ultimately an ethical one. That's where true love is. Wojtyla says, there is no possibility of psychological completeness in love unless ethical completeness is attained. In other words, love as experience should be subordinated to love as virtue. So much so that without love as virtue, there can be no fullness in the experience of love. So in every situation in which we experience the sexual value of a person, when we start to notice them, we have there's the appeal, there's the interest. The love that we really are seeking demands integration, meaning the incorporation of that value in the value of the person. That we don't just focus on the sexual value or the attraction, but we then integrate it with they're a whole person, not just attractive, not just beautiful, not just making me feel good with their kind words and the attention they give me. This is a whole person with their own needs, longings, areas of needed growth. So we must incorporate it or indeed subordinate it to the value of the person. This is where we see clearly expressed the fundamental ethical characteristic of love. It is an affirmation of the person, or else it is not love at all. Now, this is not to downplay the emotional aspect, the attractions and desires. Those are minimum criteria for building a loving relationship. At minimum, there needs to be some attraction. But like what Pope John Paul II says here, unless both parties respond to sexual values, there is no possibility of all this. Okay, that's why God gave us the sexual values and interests and hormones to start to draw people to wanting to be toward other people. Because really, without that, once you get to know people, you realize people are complex. They got problems. They're difficult. It can be tough to live with another person, to form a lasting bond that is mutually beneficial. All right, so there needs to be some sort of motivation. That's the sexual urge to help us overcome all the difficulties and all the pitfalls that we can encounter in any relationship, particularly one that's to build a family. So God gave us Eros to lead to that union that he ultimately calls us to. All right, so there needs to be this sexual attraction. Now, to be clear, I like what he says next. Sexual values, as we know, are connected not just with the impression made by the body as a possible object of enjoyment, but also with the total impression made by a human being of the other sex, by the womanliness or the manliness of the other person. This second impression is the more important and also makes itself felt earlier in time. In a naturally healthy and unspoilt young person, the first experiences relating to sexual values have to do with a human being of the other sex, and not primarily with a body as the possible object of enjoyment. Okay, what does all that mean? It means that the sexual interest is not so much just in the other sex as such. Like, I'm not just attracted to all women, or just to the concept, the abstract concept of the opposite sex. No, I identified a particular person, and this is the one that I chose to pursue. And so, yes, there's the appeal for being a member of the opposite sex, but there's more to her than just that. And so I desire her as a person. And in healthy enough persons, this is felt early enough that it supersedes just the attraction to the sexual aspects of the person. When I read this, I would say that this may actually give hope to some individuals who enter into a relationship without a strong sexual urge or arousal for the other, such as in, say, arranged marriages, or even in some relationships where one person may have a variety of sexual attractions, and so there's some struggle with how much they're attracted just to their partner, or to their partner in general, because they still are developing those attractions. But if you can get to that place of seeing the value of the complementary sex, of seeing that, she as a woman has value, and there's something that is valuable for me to have in my life in unifying with her, then you have the initial foundation for later attraction and furthering desire and actual love. Because ultimately, sexual values cannot serve as the sole or even the primary motive in choosing a partner. The value of the person as such must be primary. It's not the only value that matters in choosing a partner, but it is the most important. To choose only or mainly based on the sexual values, based on how sexy someone is, would be faulty, for it does not recognize the value of the whole person. If you base things only on your arousal, on your sexual attractiveness, well then that choice will inevitably be the starting point for a love that's incapable of integration, a love that is defective and invalid. See, this is what bothers me when people say they need to check if they're sexually compatible before marriage, where they use that as ultimately a justification to use the other, and they're prioritizing enjoyment of their body. It's not really necessary for you to know if you're meant to be married. Do you love that other person? Yes. Okay. Sexual compatibility is not a real thing. Okay? This is a myth our sexually deviant culture has made up to justify fornication and cohabitation. We need to test it out. We need to give it a test run. And yet the truth is, the reality, which anyone who actually understands how God designed us is not surprised by this, but couples who cohabitate before marriage have a greater likelihood of divorce. So tell me how testing out will actually help you. No, when you're setting your foundation for your relationship on use of the other, on viewing them primarily as a sexual object, so that the relationship stays, lasts, or falls apart based on how much they sexually please you, then you're setting a foundation for a very rocky and ultimately a shallow relationship that's going to collapse on itself. In true love, you embark on the journey of learning how to please each other sexually together. There's no guarantee that it's going to work out. Our culture has been so pornified that we just think, oh, two people are going to have like this magnetism and they're just going to know instinctively what to do, how to move, how to please each other. It's going to be hot and steamy. That's not real life. That's fantasy. In true love, the two of you go on this journey and you have some trial and error. You learn together what makes you pleased, what helps you feel connected and feel loved and get excited. And you accept the limitations that you both may experience. And you accept certain parts of your bodies that maybe don't seem as lovely or exciting or thrilling. But when you have a love for the person, those things get sort of absorbed into your greater love for that person. And so you're not fixated on just being sexy, having a perfect body, having perfect moves and performance skills. So that even if there are obstacles and setbacks, you proceed because of love of that person, not just a so-called love of the other person's sexual values, their sexiness. That's not love at all, ultimately. And so as you embark on this journey of really going all in and committing to the other, that is what becomes betrothed love. In betrothed love, the lover goes outside the self to find a fuller existence in another. Betrothed love is the love that is the gift of self. Self-giving can have its full value only when it involves and is the work of the will. Betrothed love commits the will in a profound way to serve a person. That's what enables you to push through obstacles, setbacks, disappointments in life. Even if you're more a Puritan, not so much one of the sexual revolutionaries that we talked about in our first video, and you find the sexual value mostly in procreation, well, betrothed love enables you to love despite things like infertility and other setbacks, difficulties in the pregnancy process, because you value the person not just for their ability to procreate. So we need to understand that whether we're giving in to the culture of Puritanism or the culture of just self-gratification from orgasm. In betrothed love, there is mutuality. There's a mutual surrendering and interpenetration. See, we tend to view the woman as the one who is passive or the one who's surrendering. But in true love, there is a mutual surrender of both persons. They belong equally to each other. Not mutual sexual exploitation, but reciprocal self-giving. Love cannot take the form of mere use, even if enjoyment is mutual and simultaneous. Instead, it finds its proper expression in the union of persons. The result of unification is that each belongs to the other, a reality expressed in various ways, among them full sexual intercourse, which we shall call marital intercourse, since, as we shall see, marriage is the only proper place for it. Betrothed love, which carries within itself an inner need to make a gift of one's own person to another human being, has a natural grandeur of its own. There's a greater ecstasy that comes not just from an orgasm, from a sexual experience, but that comes from the security and the safety and the pleasure, the enjoyment of having someone in your life who's committed to you, who opens himself to you as well. So it is essential in a loving relationship for there to be reciprocity. Now, this might sound ironic, since so much of what we've been talking about is that love is willing the good of the other, about surrendering your own self-interest and considering the interests of the other, or the needs, the longings, the goodness of the other. So reciprocity means I give to you, you give to me. How does that fit into our earlier understanding of love? Well, a loving relationship is one in which I am considering the good of the other while the other person is considering the good of me. And we go back and forth in that, and therefore no need is left unmet. The desire for reciprocity does not cancel out the disinterested character of love. Reciprocity is the synthesis of love as desire and love as goodwill. And the really interesting thing about reciprocity is that in giving ourselves, we find clear proof that we possess ourselves. See, that self-giving love starts with self-ownership. Like I said at the beginning, understanding who you are, what your worth is. When I understand that, then I can actually properly give myself. I'm not being used, I'm not being a victim of someone else's manipulation and use of me, or exploitation of me. But I'm freely giving of myself, because I understand that it's me, it's myself that I'm giving. I own me. And so you can only give what you actually own. Otherwise, it's not an actual gift. Someone's just taking back what isn't yours. If, say, your body doesn't belong to you. But no, because I'm in charge of myself, when I am loving, I am choosing to give myself. So therefore, self-giving is a sign that I understand my own worth. Therefore, I'm not going to just choose anyone to give that love to. Okay, there's going to be some wisdom I'm going to have to see, does this person have the capacity to appreciate the value of the gift of self that I'm prepared to give? Because if marriage is to satisfy the demands of the personalistic norm, it must embody reciprocal self-giving, a mutual betrothed love. And what happens is that mutual self-surrender produces a perfect whole. Two people give themselves fully to the other, it creates something new. That's the oneness, the ichad that we mentioned in the earlier videos. So you see there, it's a mystery. This is what Ephesians 5 talks about when it says that husbands, love your wives as Christ loves the church. And I'm speaking of a great mystery of Christ and the church. This is a great mystery, meaning it's a symbol. It's a secret thing of God that He is revealing to us through the marital relationship. So there's a reciprocity in our marital relationship that actually represents the reciprocity in our relationship to God. But just appreciate the mystery of that reciprocity first. Just think about that. Acceptance must also be giving, and giving, receiving. Okay? The mystery here is that in reciprocity, the one opening to receive is actually giving a gift. And the one giving is also receiving something. Okay, when my wife opens to receive my gift, not just in sex, but in any time which I'm expressing my affection to her, or when I'm offering her comfort when she's down, or when I'm just spending some time with her and offering my company, my presence, when she opens to receive that, I feel loved just as much as if she were giving me herself. There's something affirming when the other person chooses to open to receive me, because what she's communicating to me is, you have something of value that will actually be beneficial to me, and it's you. So to open to receive you, I'm affirming you as a person. That means a lot to me. Just as well as when I open to receive my wife. I think of, say, dinners. My wife loves to cook, and she'll cook things that she doesn't even enjoy. Why? Because she loves to see my enjoyment of the things she cooks. And when I say, oh, this was awesome, this tasted great, she looks for it in my face. She loves to see, where I'm making love to the food. I'm like, that affirms her. Even if she's like, it's too salty or too sweet. That's how she is. She doesn't like desserts. My wife doesn't like sweets, but she loves to make me desserts. Maybe a little too much. So I'm trying to make her cut back on stuffing me. But there's an affirmation when what you're giving to the other is received. So in that way, she's giving me something just as well as I'm giving her something when I receive her. What this reminds me of is something from Larry Crabb, the late Christian psychologist. In his book, Fully Alive, he talks about the core terrors of male and female. For men, because of our call to move into the unknown, to bring order, that habitable order that blesses others, our core terror is weightlessness, meaning that what we offer won't have weight, it won't have gravity, it won't have significance, it won't have meaning. And so when we are overwhelmed by that terror, we pull back. We're not assertive as men. We become passive, effeminate. Women, because of how they are gifted by God to be the ones who are opened to receive, their core terror is invisibility. That in being open to be receiving of the other, that they'll just be used. And their core longings, their core needs won't really be seen and met. That they'll just be forced to receive whatever the other guy is giving. And they'll just have to accept it without truly being understood in the way that the man is offering a gift or forcing himself on her. And so if a woman succumbs to that core terror of being invisible, she'll put up a wall and she'll close herself off. And so Larry Crabb uses this illustration of the bridge of connection. A man on one end, a woman on the other. The man sees the woman, but he feels like, she's not going to see my worth, my value. She's not going to affirm my value. The woman sees the man on the other side and sees him as a potential threat, a risk to her own needs, her own well-being, and she closes herself off. And so they don't meet on that bridge of connection. But when we gradually work at opening ourselves vulnerably to the goodness of the other, then we can meet on that bridge. And as we do that, then love matures. Reciprocity is the proof that love has matured, that it has become something between persons, has created a community of feeling, and that its full nature has thereby been realized. And what it matures into is responsibility, a responsibility to the other. One thing I teach my clients all the time is that the mark of maturity is you grow in awareness that you are responsible for yourself as well as to others. See, a child has no responsibilities when they're born. And the parent's role is to gradually instill worth into the child and train them up to understand what they have to offer and what they're capable of, so that they can gradually grow into being responsible for themselves. And then to go beyond that, to understand that, okay, now that I am responsible for myself, there's a way in which I am responsible to carry others' burdens. Like it says in Galatians 6, each person is to carry their own load. That's your basic responsibilities that each person's capable of. But you're responsible to help carry each other's burdens. And burden is something that one person cannot take care of themselves, such as a certain need, a longing that can only be met in relationship. And so, as I love my wife, I understand more and more my responsibility to help her meet the needs that she can't meet on her own. And to go a little bit further with this, as we both help each other that way, we become more aware of how neither of us can fully meet each other's needs. And so it makes us more aware of our ultimate dependency on God, that He's the ultimate source of the fulfillment of our needs. Karol Wojtyla says, there exists in love a particular responsibility, the responsibility for a person who is drawn into the closest possible partnership in the life and activity of another, and becomes in a sense the property of whoever benefits from this gift of self. It follows that one also has a responsibility for one's own love. Is it mature and complete enough to justify the enormous trust of another person? The hope that giving oneself will not mean losing one's own soul, but on the contrary, enlarging one's existence? Or will it all end in disillusionment? Unquote. The immensity can be understood only by one who has a complete awareness of the value of the person. Going back to what I said at the start. The greater the feeling of responsibility for the person, the more true love there is. Therefore, it's a weighty matter to whom you choose to give your love. It's a mystery how we come to know who to choose. There are no rigid rules. But as you get to know each other, you get to figure out, okay, this person has enough that I can trust to impart this gift of self. And they see enough of my own worthiness. And they know enough of their own worthiness that they see how they can give themselves to me. And as you live life together, life will determine the value of a choice and the value and true magnitude of love. It is put to the test most severely when the sensual and emotional reactions themselves, meaning the sexual desires and urges, the attractions, when they grow weaker, and sexual values as such lose their effect. Nothing then remains except the value of the person, and the inner truth about the love of those concerned comes to light. If their love is a true gift of self, so that they belong each to the other, it will not only survive, but grow stronger and sink deeper roots. When a person's choice is a mature and valid act, and love is integrated as it should be in the inner life of the person, it is transformed both in its psychological and in its emotional aspect. Now, we all instinctively are aware of this, that attractions may fade. There's an instability to our emotions, that women unfortunately feel the brunt of this the most, that they had to first appeal to their partner. The man had to see them as beautiful, and they worry. There's an anxiety that comes from this instability of emotions, that will he always see me as beautiful? Will I always be the object of his desire? But a love which has matured within the subject frees itself from this anxiety by its choice of person. The emotion becomes serene and confident, for it ceases to be absorbed entirely in itself and attaches itself instead to its object, the beloved person. The purely subjective truth of the emotion has given place to the objective truth about the person, who is the object of choice and of love. As a result, the emotion itself seems to acquire new properties. That attraction and desire, it begins to morph and change. It becomes simpler and soberer. This is why God has actually gifted us with a degree of sexual attraction fluidity. Because once you commit to a person, the attraction for that person needs to be based on more than how that person was when you first met them. As you age, as maybe you have changes in your body from weight gain or weight loss or surgeries or disfigurement from accidents. This is like the question my wife would ask me when we first married. If I got into a car crash and my body was burnt, would you still love me? This is that anxiety, the insecurity that comes up when we think that what makes us lovable is our attractiveness, our sexuality. But even as my wife and I have aged, and our marriage has gone now approaching 16 years, it's been put to the test in multiple ways. And I constantly am assuring my wife as much as I can that my love for her is deeper than how she looks compared to how she was when I first met her. And actually, it's become more and more about her as a person, so that sometimes there might be something that she might consider a flaw, and it doesn't mean a thing to me. My love for her surpasses that, and therefore my attraction to her remains stable. And in fact, it flourishes, it gets stronger, because I'm not just attracted to certain physical features, I'm attracted to her as a person entirely. The love of person makes us feel emotional love for the person as he or she really is. Not for the person of our imagination, but for the real person. We love the person complete with all of his or her virtues and faults, and up to a point independently of those virtues, and in spite of those faults. The strength of such a love emerges most clearly when the beloved person stumbles, when his or her weaknesses or even sins come into the open. I thank God that early in our dating relationship, my wife and I, then my fiance, we shared honestly about our struggles. We didn't keep things from each other. We kept none of our sin struggles a secret. So we're making an informed choice to proceed in this relationship. So now it's so much easier if I were to mess up in some way, or her to mess up. There's such an openness between us, and an acceptance and a grace for each other. Wojtyla continues, one who truly loves does not then withdraw his love, but loves all the more, loves in full consciousness of the other's shortcomings and faults, and without in the least approving of them. For the person as such never loses its essential value. The emotion which attaches itself to the value of the person remains loyal to the human being. Like I was saying, when my wife and I were first dating, we became very aware of our past struggles and even some current struggles. And I remember when I was taking a marital therapy class in college, and the discussion came up of, well, if a husband were to cheat on his wife, but she were never to know, should he share it with her? Or if he were to have a porn struggle, should he share that with her? Or if she were to have some sort of sin struggle, should she share that with him if he didn't know? You know, she can repent to God. Does she need to confess that to him? Wouldn't that just damage him? Wouldn't that just hurt the other person more? Wouldn't it just hurt your wife to tell her that you have a porn addiction? Or you've been using prostitutes or acting out in different ways? You don't want to hurt her, right? And I felt like at the time I went against the whole class by saying she has the right to know, but also in our dating relationship, we shared everything with each other early on. And what I thought in that moment was, here's my opportunity to share with my wife God's love, to be an example to her, to be an embodiment of Jesus' love for her, his sacrificial love. Because at least at that point, I knew enough about her to know that that sin struggle she had was not all that she is. That she has a worth that's way beyond her struggle. And she saw that in me as well, as I was able to share with her openly. That gives us a love that can endure a lot of hardships. And it's been tested. I praise God that that love has endured and grown and blossomed more and more. The problem is that in our culture, we tend to think that love is something complete from the start. Something given, ready-made to another person or to other humans. And we just think, well, it's just I have my love and I just give it. This is a very common assumption, especially among young, sadly immature people. But it is one which tends to prevent that which we have called here the integration of love. Love so conceived is merely a psychological situation, and it seems unnatural to subject it to the dictates of objective morality. The truth is that love is never complete, but rather always becoming. And what it becomes depends upon the contribution of both persons and the depth of their commitment. This is the true adventure of love. That you go on this adventure together, you're not sure exactly where it's going to take you in life, but you're going to be committed to each other no matter the difficulties. And there is no need then to be dismayed or discouraged if love sometimes follows some torturous and difficult paths. God grants us grace all the more. He gives us the power to make straight the paths of human love. And that's God himself showing his own love to us. So I pray that this series has been beneficial to you, that has contributed to your own goodness, your own development. May you be blessed by it. May you now have a hunger for love that is whole, integrated, and betrothed, just like God's own love for you. So don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And until next time, know that Jesus loves you freely, fully, faithfully, and fruitfully.